So a few games into Ten Hag's tenure, and it's already clear that there's been massive improvements to the individual abilities of a few members of the squad, including Scott McTominay, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, Rafael Varane, and arguably most notably the two fullbacks, Diego Dalot and Tyrone Malacia.
But before I go any further, let me tell you some exciting news from today's sponsor, OneFootball. Where if you are in the UK or Ireland, you can watch one Serie A game each week on a Saturday, completely free by downloading the OneFootball app. The live game a few weeks ago was Lazio v Napoli, which was a fantastic game, one of the best games I've watched this season. Last weekend it was Sampdoria v AC Milan, and this weekend it's Torino v Sassuolo. You can also watch highlights from a number of different leagues across the world, and you can also keep up to date with any breaking news and live scores. By downloading the OneFootball app, you will be helping to support the channel, so I'll leave it linked in the description below.
Prior to Ten Hag's appointment, Malacia was a relatively unknown quantity in the Eredivisie. Last season he was impressive, particularly from a defensive point of view, but he was still young and raw, and it would have been a stretch by anyone's standard to say he was a top 6 level fullback at this point in his career. Diego Dalot was a player that had seemingly fallen away from his potential that he had when he first arrived at Manchester United under Jose Mourinho, now being seen as a player who needed to be replaced, and really only retained his place as a starting right back for Ten Hag due to United not bringing in another right back during the summer transfer window. However, already we've seen both players move to the next level, with Dalot and Malacia now cementing themselves as United's first choice fullbacks ahead of Wan-Bissaka and Luke Shaw, with both having top level defensive performances against Leicester, Liverpool, Southampton and Arsenal. But what is the reason behind this sudden improvement? Well, I think the credit has to be laid at the feet of Erik Ten Hag, and in particular the tactical roles that both the United fullbacks play, which I think gets the best out of their strengths whilst minimising their weaknesses. See, whilst Dalot and Malacia have been excellent, I think everyone will concede that they aren't top level, in the same category as players like Cancelo, Trent, Alphonso Davies, etc. Certainly from an offensive point of view at least. Both Dalot and Malacia, to me at least, are very naturally good one-on-one defenders, with both having pace, concentration and aggressive tackling technique that has seen him excel against opponents like Mo Salah, Harvey Barnes and Luis Diaz this season. I do still think they need to improve their defensive positioning, Dalot in particular, but because United's defensive shape is so organised and well coordinated, both players seem to be a lot more assured of their positioning in defensive situations. However, going forward, I feel like both do still need to improve, which is understandable as both are still just 23 years old, but in the United system that Ten Hag is using, they don't have as much offensive responsibility as they would in many other systems. This is because in possession both Dalot and Malacia hold deeper positions, inverting infield to create a free with Varane and Martinez, or Eriksen and McTominay, with both players alternating who drops where depending on the positioning of the ball. In possession, rather than being tasked with overlapping the wide attackers and pushing forward into attacking positions down the flanks, both instead are tasked with progressing the ball forward from deeper positions, largely through quick interplay with the midfielders on their side, or in Dalot's case, long switches of play or passes over the back line. This means that their offensive output in the final third via their crossing and dribbling isn't as necessary as other fullbacks have to be. A great example to contrast how Dalot and Malacia are used is how Pochettino used the likes of Walker and Trippier and Danny Rose and Ben Davies around 2014 to 2019. In Pochettino's Tottenham system, because he would use either wide playmakers such as Christian Eriksen or Eric Lamela, or inside forwards such as Heung-min Son or Nacer Chadli from the flanks, who would invert into central positions, the burden of providing advanced width in the system fell on the fullbacks, and so with the midfield double pivot in Poch's 4-2-3-1 of Eric Dyer and Moussa Dembele providing the defensive security, the fullbacks were instructed to overlap down the flanks and sit in advanced positions, and so having adequate creative ability from those positions was a necessity. But in Ten Hag's 4-2-3-1, it's the wide attackers who provide the advanced width in the system, and so Dalot and Malacia instead are required to provide the ball progression from deep positions and defensive security in central areas in case of a turnover, which is why for both players quick interplay, forward passing and defensive abilities are a lot more necessary for the side's overall balance than their offensive output in the final third, which is exactly what both players excel at. And this inverted fullback role so far has been the main tactical evolution of the 2020s. In the late 2000s and throughout the early 2010s, it was the overlapping fullback providing winger-like offensive output at the top level that was a main tactical change. Think Barcelona and Spain's use of Dani Alves and Jordi Alba, and even Philipp Lahm and Alaba at Bayern Munich, which enabled those sides to use inside forwards or wide playmakers who move in field rather than holding their width, with wide players such as Hazard, Neymar, Alexis Sanchez and Christian Eriksen being their side's main advanced playmakers drifting in from the flanks. But at the top level, the fullback is now now a ball progressor from deep, almost another deep line playmaker if you like, playing the same position that we would see players like Toni Kroos, Bastian Schweinsteiger, Xabi Alonso and Cesc Fabregas play throughout the last decade. And that's why I saw the inverted fullback kind of becoming football's equivalent of the quarterback, which I discussed in detail in my video looking at what Manchester United could learn from the NFL, and I'll leave that linked in the description. Fullbacks like João Cancelo, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Alexander Zinchenko now offer a creative threat from these quarterback positions, and there are a few reasons for this. Firstly, managers like Guardiola, Arteta, Ten Hag and even Klopp to an extent have begun to transition from having wide attackers playing high and narrow, sitting between the lines on the inside of their fullback, to now staying high and wide on the outside of their fullback, playing more like natural wingers. Now Guardiola did even do this at Bayern and Barcelona, but I would say that at City he now uses more natural wingers, who even in the final third hold their width, whereas at Barcelona and Bayern, the wide attackers Pedro and David Villa for example, would hold their width in the defensive and middle thirds, but then they would be used more like inside forwards, making diagonal runs into central positions in the final third. With teams now using natural wingers that hold their width, the fullback is no longer able to overlap into that space, and because we now often see a player push up from a deep midfield position in between the lines, as Granit Xhaka does for Arsenal, and Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne have done over the past few seasons for City, the fullbacks now don't have the space to overlap into, and so are now much more useful holding a narrow and deep position in behind the 3/8s pushing between the lines, becoming almost like wide defensive midfielders in possession. If you watch my analysis of the Arsenal-Manchester United game, you'll see that during a lot of the United attacks, when the ball was in the final third, Dalot or Malacia, when the ball was on the opposite side to them, rather than holding their width, would instead hold a narrow position in field. And what this means is that if there is a turnover, United have added protection in central areas. And so you can see that the use of inverted fullbacks can be used to aid a side defensively as well as offensively. Now because this tactical role is relatively new in development in the modern game, we obviously haven't seen the full evolution of fullbacks into this role, and so as the decade goes on I think we will begin to see fullbacks specialise more in central areas, and managers like Ten Hag and Pep, rather than looking for fullbacks who have the offensive qualities of wingers, will instead look for fullbacks who have the offensive qualities of deeper line playmakers, because that is the area of the field they will have to take up in possession. And so over the next few seasons, United, like with basically every position on the field, will have to be continuously looking to improve, in order to not just compete for the Premier League title but also for the Champions League as well. So if Ten Hag continues with the use of inverted fullbacks, which I think he will, which players on the market will be able to compete with Dalot and Malacia, and potentially give United two top class options in both fullback positions? Well, one player who already plays this role to a degree, and who I would say is already in that world class category, is Theo Hernandez at AC Milan. Theo is still only 24, 25 in October, but since he's moved to Milan in 2019, he has developed rapidly as one of the best defensive left backs in world football, and under Stefano Pioli over the past season or so, we have seen Theo take up more central positions in possession, either drifting in between the lines, sitting behind the opposition's midfield in the half space, or retaining a deeper position in front of the midfield line. And his attributes certainly suit this, as he's an exceptional ball progressor, especially via his dribbling, reminding me of a young Gareth Bale with his unique athletic ability to drive the ball up the pitch at pace, almost like a 400-metre runner, and we can see this dribbling ability when we look at his FB Ref report, as he ranks in the 94th percentile for progressive carries and the 92nd for dribbles, showing just how good he is with the ball at his feet. But his overall offensive output is sensational. He sits in the 76th percentile for progressive passes, meaning that for all of his ball progression metrics, he is in the top 25% or above, but he also ranks in the mid to high 80s for non-penalty goals and non-penalty XG, whilst also sitting in the 92nd percentile for XG assisted, showing that Theo is not just going to be excellent at progressing the ball from those deep positions where an inverted fullback would sit in possession, but he can also be used as a very credible attacking weapon in the final third as well, with him being excellent at putting in crosses, driving into the box, as well as being an aerial threat himself, whilst also having probably the best shot you'll see from any fullback in world football. Having Theo at left back would not only give United two excellent fullback options to play in that inverted left back role, but also a world class attacking fullback who could arguably provide an attacking threat almost as good as most of the attacking players in the United side. Another player who I think would be perfect for Ten Hag's system in that role, this time from the right, is Monaco's 21-year-old Brazilian right back Vanderson. Vanderson was signed from Grêmio in January of this year for around £10 million.
but I already think he looks like the next breakout star in Europe from that fullback position. He's athletic, quick and strong, whilst also being an aggressive tackler with excellent technique. Combine this with his powerful dribbling ability, quick interplay in congested areas, and his end product in the final third, and you can see why I rate him so highly. He ranks in the 61st percentile for progressive carries, the 92nd for dribbles, and the 78th for progressive passes, which whilst not yet as high as Teo's progressive metrics, are certainly very impressive for a 21-year-old who's only been in Europe half a season. He ranks in the low 70s for XG assisted and around the mid 80s for non-penalty goals and non-penalty XG. So like Teo, Van der Sar has the capabilities of providing a much greater threat in the final third than either Malacia or Dalot can at the moment. But also from a defensive point of view, both Van der Sar and Teo are perfect for this role, as both are extremely quick across the ground whilst being physical and excellent slide tacklers, making them ideal for that inverted fullback role out of possession, being tasked with breaking up the opposition's attacks before they reach the United defensive third. Now these two would be incredibly expensive, Teo likely costing probably more than £60 million and Van der Sar around £40 million, or even more than that depending on how both players develop over the coming years. But from a long-term point of view, these are the two fullbacks who I think suit this inverted fullback role perfectly, not just because of their ball carrying abilities which would allow United to switch the play and have either one drive the ball forward, whilst also having the necessary interplay to link play in congested areas, but also because of what they can bring to the side from a defensive point of view. And I'd say that that is, at the moment, something that even the best inverted fullbacks in the world like Cancelo and Trent don't have in their game to the same level as these two. I think ideally for possession-based sides, players like Kimmich and Camavinga, who are defensive midfielders who have the defensive capabilities of slotting in at fullback, but also the progressive passing ability to be creative threats from deep, will be the future of this role, though I do think it may be 3 to 5 years away before we start seeing central midfielders being regularly converted into the fullback position. So overall, the inverted fullback role perfectly suits what Malacia and Dalot excel at, whilst also taking the burden off what they aren't quite as good at. As the role develops, I think we'll begin to see fullbacks who specialise more in tighter central areas, being better passers than crossers and almost becoming like central midfielders. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you get notified when my videos come out. Check out some of my other videos which will be linked in the description, and put your thoughts in the comments section as well.